Supergirl killed the DCU. No, I'm not saying DC or Superman or Batman. I mean, relax. Batman's fine. Warner Brothers would sell the office furniture, the water coolers, and possibly David Zaslav's chair before it let Batman disappear. But the DCU, as James Gunn and Peter Safran sold it, the big connected rebuild, that 8 to 10 year plan, the trust us, this is all leading somewhere pitch, that version, well, it's dead. And Supergirl's the receipt, because Supergirl did not just fail at the box office. It failed at the worst possible time. Right as the Warner Brothers Discovery Paramount Skydance deal is closing soon, hopefully. A deal with regulatory pressure, delayed closing questions, planned cost cuts, a ticking fee problem if the deal drags past October, and roughly $80 billion in estimated post-merger debt. So this is no longer just a James Gunn problem. It's no longer just a DC Studios problem. It's no longer just another superhero movie face planting into the pavement while YouTube argues over who gets to use the biggest red arrow. It's a timing problem, a debt problem, a contract problem, and a new owner problem. Because the DCU was built under one corporate reality, but David Ellison may inherit a very different one. And when your cinematic universe needs time, trust, and multiple chances, the last thing you want hanging over it is an $80 billion debt clock. So today, we're not just asking whether Supergirl flopped. Spoiler alert, it did. We're asking what happens when the movie that killed the DCU, as sold, is followed by Man of Tomorrow, the 2027 Superman sequel that may now function as James Gunn and Peter Safran's final performance review. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, Chris here, the Critical Nerd, and I gotta say thank you to all the returning viewers, and if you're new here, welcome, stick around. Because what we do here is we keep expectations low and the receipts high, and we try very hard not to let Hollywood PR departments do our thinking for us. And before anyone says, wait Chris, you stayed away from the DC is dead angle for quite a while. Yeah, I did. That was intentional. Before Supergirl opened, in my opinion, the smarter argument was not the DCU's dead. The smarter argument was trust, the box office math, audience intent, whether Superman created enough goodwill to carry the next movie, whether the DCU could sell more than one character, whether the new ownership situation could shorten the leash. That was the lane. Then Supergirl opened. Then it dropped. Then the excuses started. And at some point, you stop calling it a warning sign and start calling it what it is. Supergirl killed the DCU as it was sold, not because one movie alone destroys every future DC project, but because it killed the argument that audiences have bought into this connected universe. And that is the part that matters. Let's start with the basic receipt. Supergirl opened soft. Yeah. AP reported $38 million domestic opening and $68 million worldwide. We know after the actuals dropped shortly thereafter, it looked a little bit worse than that. For a major DC release tied to the beginning of a new cinematic universe, that's already a problem, especially with the reported production budget around $170 million. Then Weekend 2 arrived, and Supergirl dropped 74% down to $9.6 million domestic. That's not a normal blockbuster slide. That's not people are busy. That's not maybe everyone was waiting for Discount Tuesday. That is a cliff dive with a cape. And yes, that is bad for James Gunn, bad for Peter Safran, bad for Warner Brothers, bad for anyone who tried to pretend trailer chatter and online fan art automatically translated into ticket sales. But the money alone is not the real issue. The real issue is what the money says. Supergirl was supposed to prove that Superman created enough goodwill to lift the next DC title. It was supposed to prove the audience was not just buying Superman. They were buying the DCU. And that didn't happen. And that is why this matters. If Superman works, but Supergirl collapses, then maybe the audience did not buy the universe. Maybe they bought Superman. That is a very different business. A Superman lane is valuable. A Batman lane is valuable. But that is not the same thing as a cinematic universe. That is not the same thing as people showing up because the DC Studios logo means something again. Supergirl exposed that gap. And once that gap is exposed, the original plan is dead. What remains is triage. Now, here's where the timing makes this much worse. If Supergirl had flopped 2 years into a stable Warner Brothers Discovery structure, this would still be ugly, but maybe the studio could say, we believe in the plan. Maybe they could eat the loss. Maybe they could sell it as one stumble inside a longer rebuild. But that's not the corporate reality right now. Warner Brothers Discovery is moving toward the Paramount Skydance deal. And according to Reuters, that deal is already dealing with state-level legal pressure, regulatory review, delayed closing questions, and a possible ticking fee structure if the closing gets pushed too far. Reuters also reported the combined company could carry roughly $80 billion in estimated post-merger debt. Yeah, $80 billion. That is not cut back on Office Snacks money. That's not somebody tell Aquaman to start doing DoorDash money. There are also planned cost reductions reportedly around $6 billion. So let's translate this into normal human language. Paramount is not just buying Warner Brothers, it's buying pressure. Debt pressure, regulatory pressure, cost-cutting pressure, investor pressure. And into that environment walks Supergirl, politely handing the incoming owner a box office problem in a little red cape. That is the timing issue. Supergirl did not fail in a vacuum. It failed while Warner's future owner may soon be looking at every major asset asking, what works? What pays? What scales? What needs cutting? And what is just an expensive promise with bad math? That is a brutal environment for a cinematic universe that suddenly needs excuses. Now's the part that gets missed when everything becomes as James Gunn cooked. James Gunn is the public face of the DCU. Peter Safran, his business partner. David Zaslav backed the rebuild. But if Paramount Skydance closes the Warner deal, David Ellison may be the one inheriting the consequences. And that matters because David Zaslav helped build the Gunn Safran DCU. Ellison may inherit the bill. And owners do not look at franchises like fans do. Fans see Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Green Lantern in the hope that DC can finally stop stepping on rakes in public. Executives see production spend, marketing spend, theatrical upside, streaming value, consumer products, debt service, and whether the last movie made the brand easier or harder to defend in a boardroom. Supergirl, well, made it harder. I mean, Supergirl did not kill DC, did not kill Superman, did not kill Batman. But Supergirl did kill the idea that this DCU had already earned audience trust beyond Superman. And that's the problem. Because the whole point of the reboot was not just to make one Superman movie. The point was to rebuild DC as a connected universe, a universe where audiences follow the brand from one character to the next. Supergirl was the first major test of that. And the audience said, no, not maybe, not we will see. They said no. That is the kind of answer executives notice. Now, I mentioned that $81 billion in debt. And this is why debt matters. Debt does not automatically cancel movies. Debt does not automatically fire executives. Debt does not automatically mean David Ellison is sitting in a boardroom with a red pen, crossing out every character who cannot bench press $1 billion. Although, let's be honest, that would be a very Hollywood meeting. What debt does is change patience. When a company is comfortable, a flop can be explained as part of the creative journey. When a company is under pressure, a flop becomes evidence. That's the difference. Under a patient owner, Supergirl's a symbol. Under a debt-loaded owner, Supergirl's a warning label. And the DCU now has to make its case in that environment. Not the Comic-Con environment, not the fan theory environment, not the Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters PowerPoint environment. The debt environment, the cost-cutting environment, the show me the return environment. This is a much colder room. And Gunn's DCU now has to walk into it with Supergirl attached to the file. Good luck making that look cute. So coming in 2027, we have Man of Tomorrow, which becomes we'll see, it's much bigger than a Superman sequel. And Gunn and Safran's current DC Studios contracts reportedly end only a few months after that release. That means Man of Tomorrow is not just the next chapter of the DCU. It's the closing argument. It's the renewal pitch. It's the final exam. It's the movie that arrives right before the new ownership group has to look at the Gunn Safran era and ask, do we renew this? Do we narrow this? Do we restructure this? Or do we do the classic Hollywood move where everyone says, we remain incredibly excited about the future, and then 6 months later, half the slate disappears like it owed somebody money? That is why Supergirl matters, because Supergirl changed what Man of Tomorrow has to do. Before Supergirl, Man of Tomorrow could be the continuation of a plan. After Supergirl, Man of Tomorrow has to justify the plan. That is a much heavier lift. Now it has to prove Superman was not a one-character island. It has to prove Gunn still has enough audience trust to lead DC. It has to prove the DCU brand could survive outside the maybe Superman is back honeymoon period. And it has to do all that while new ownership is looking at debt, cost reductions, franchise value, and whether this entire cinematic universe is a growth engine or a very expensive side quest. No pressure. Just save the universe, justify the contract, calm the investors, defend the slate, and maybe sell a few action figures while you're at it. Now, I have to be precise here. Supergirl killed the DCU, but not in the dumb way. It did not erase DC. It did not make Batman worthless. It did not make Superman vanish. It killed the DCU as originally sold, the connected plan, the 8 to 10 year promise, the idea that audiences would follow this universe from Superman to Supergirl to the next secondary character because the DC Studios brand had been restored. That's what died. And that is why one movie does not kill a universe, misses the point. One movie can absolutely kill the argument for a universe. If the whole pitch is trust and the audience refuses to transfer that trust, the pitch is broken. And that's what happened here. Maybe Superman is fine. Maybe Man of Tomorrow does well. Maybe Batman remains the automatic money machine because Batman could fight a parking meter for 2 hours and half the internet would call it cinema. But that is not the same thing as a healthy DCU. A healthy DCU means the audience follows the brand. Supergirl proved they're not doing that yet. And with the Paramount Warner deal looming, not yet, may not be good enough anymore. So yes, I'm saying it plainly now. Supergirl killed the DCU as James Gunn and Peter Safran sold it. Not DC, not Superman, not Batman, but the connected trust long-range DCU rebuild. That version is dead. Now Man of Tomorrow has to make a new argument. And that is a brutal position for Gunn and Safran. Because Man of Tomorrow is scheduled for 2027. Their current DC Studios contracts reportedly end only months after that release. And Warner Brothers Discovery is moving toward a Paramount Skydance deal with regulatory pressure, delayed closing questions, planned cost reductions, and roughly $80 billion in estimated post-merger debt. That's the real story. James Gunn has a Supergirl problem. David Ellison has an $80 billion one. And Man of Tomorrow is where those two problems collide. If the movie works, Gunn can argue Supergirl was the exception. If it underperforms, Supergirl was not the exception, it was the warning. And by that time those contracts come up, the question will not be whether fans like the plan. It will not be whether Gunn had a good explanation. It will not be whether YouTubers made enough thumbnails with flames behind the DC logo. The question will be much simpler. Does the new owner want to keep paying for this version of the DCU? Because creative visions are great, Chapter 1s are great, slate announcements are great, but eventually somebody has to pay for the cape. And Supergirl just made the invoice a lot harder to ignore. That's my read. Now I want to hear yours. Did Supergirl kill the Gunn Safran DCU as originally sold? And is Man of Tomorrow now the final chance to save the argument before the contracts come due? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, do me a favor, hit like, subscribe, ring the bell, and all the usual YouTube nonsense that tells the algorithm this channel was not created by accident. Thanks for watching. I'm Chris, the Critical Nerd, and until next time, keep your expectations low, your receipts high, and I am out.